most people live their entire lives trapped in what Joel Goldsmith called the material sense, a powerful illusion that makes you believe you are separate from the infinite source of all good. This illusion creates every problem you face: lack, disease, conflict, and fear that seem so real. But here is the liberating truth Goldsmith discovered through decades of spiritual healing work. You are not a material being having occasional spiritual experiences. You are pure consciousness itself, temporarily appearing in human form, with unlimited access to divine supply and healing power. The moment you truly grasp this fundamental shift in identity, everything changes. Your problems don't get solved, they dissolve because you realize they were never real in the first place. You stop trying to heal your body and instead recognize your spiritual perfection that was always there. This is not positive thinking or mental tricks. This is the recognition of what you have always been, the very presence of God expressing as your individual being. When you live from this truth, miracles become your natural experience because you are no longer fighting illusions. Joel Goldsmith taught that every human problem stems from one fundamental error: believing that you exist separate from your source. This belief creates what he called the pairs of opposites, good and evil, health and sickness, abundance and lack, that keep you trapped in endless cycles. When you accept that there is only one power and one presence in the universe, these opposites dissolve. There is no evil power to fight, no sickness to heal, no lack to overcome. There is only infinite good expressing itself perfectly as your life, right here and right now. The practical application begins with what Goldsmith called the practice of the presence. Instead of trying to get something from God, you recognize that you already are the fullness of God in expression. Every breath you take is God breathing. Every thought is divine intelligence flowing. Start right now by stopping all mental effort to change your circumstances. Rest in the knowing that perfection is already established. Feel the presence that you are, not the presence you hope to find. This shift from seeking to being is where true transformation begins. Goldsmith discovered that most spiritual seekers make a critical mistake. They try to use truth to improve their human experience, when truth reveals there never was a human experience to improve. You are not a person who can become more spiritual. You are spirit appearing as a person. This understanding transforms prayer completely. Instead of asking God to change your conditions, you recognize that God is your very consciousness, and your consciousness is already perfect, whole, and complete. Prayer becomes a recognition of what already is, not a request for what might be. The healing work that made Goldsmith famous worldwide was based on this principle. He never tried to heal anyone. Instead, he recognized the spiritual perfection of every person who came to him, and this recognition dissolved the illusion of imperfection that seemed to appear as their problem. You have this same power of recognition available to you right now. Look at any challenge in your life and ask, what would be true if I were pure consciousness having this experience? The answer will reveal the illusion and allow the truth to appear naturally. The deepest teaching Goldsmith shared was this: you cannot demonstrate truth. You can only be truth. Every attempt to use spiritual principles to get something keeps you trapped in the very illusion you are trying to escape. Truth is not a tool you use. Truth is what you are. This means that abundance is not something you attract or manifest. Abundance is the very nature of the infinite consciousness that you are. Health is not something you heal into. Health is the unchanging reality of your spiritual being that cannot be touched by material conditions. When you stop trying to demonstrate and simply rest in being, what the world calls miracles begin to appear naturally. Not because you made them happen, but because you stopped interfering with the perfection that was always flowing as your life experience. The invitation Goldsmith offers is radical. Stop being a human trying to be spiritual, and start being the spiritual being you have always been, appearing temporarily as human. This is not a process. This is a recognition that changes everything in an instant. A businessman came to Goldsmith facing bankruptcy, desperately seeking a spiritual solution to save his failing company. For weeks he practiced affirmations and visualizations, trying to demonstrate prosperity, but his situation only worsened. His frustration was overwhelming. Goldsmith told him something unexpected: Stop trying to make your business successful. Stop trying to be prosperous. Instead, recognize that infinite intelligence is the only power operating your consciousness, and infinite intelligence cannot fail. The man was confused but willing to try this different approach. Within 3 days of releasing all personal effort and resting in the presence of divine intelligence as his true identity, breakthrough solutions began appearing, not through his planning, but through inspiration and opportunities that seemed to arise from nowhere. Within 6 months, his business had not only recovered, but had expanded beyond his original dreams. He realized that trying to demonstrate prosperity had actually blocked the natural flow of abundance that was always available through his divine nature. A mother brought her chronically ill child to Goldsmith after years of medical treatments had failed to help. She was exhausted from trying every healing modality, both conventional and alternative, watching her daughter suffer despite all their efforts to make her well. Goldsmith spent no time discussing the child's symptoms or medical history. Instead, he helped the mother see that her daughter was not a sick child who needed healing. She was the perfect expression of divine life, temporarily appearing to experience illness as part of her spiritual journey. As the mother released her identity as someone with a sick child and embraced the truth of her daughter's spiritual perfection, something shifted in their entire family dynamic. The desperate energy of trying to fix something wrong was replaced by peaceful recognition of what was right. Over the following weeks, the child's health began improving naturally, not through any specific treatment, but through the dissolution of the mental atmosphere of illness that had surrounded their home. The healing came through recognition, not through effort. A couple on the verge of divorce sought Goldsmith's guidance, convinced their marriage was beyond repair. Years of conflict, betrayal, and resentment had created what seemed like an insurmountable barrier between them. Traditional counseling had only made them more aware of their differences. Goldsmith surprised them by saying, "There are not two people in conflict here. There is only one consciousness appearing as two individuals, and that consciousness is love itself. The conflict you experience is the illusion of separation from your true nature and from each other." He taught them to see beyond their personality differences and recognize the divine presence that was the true identity of both of them. When they stopped trying to change each other and started recognizing the spiritual perfection already present, their relationship began transforming naturally. Within months, they discovered a depth of love and understanding they had never experienced before. Their marriage became not just restored, but transformed into a spiritual partnership that supported both of their individual growth and their shared service to others. A war veteran struggling with severe trauma and nightmares came to Goldsmith feeling hopeless about ever finding peace. Years of therapy and medication had provided little relief, and he was beginning to believe he was permanently damaged by his experiences overseas. Goldsmith helped him understand that his true identity as spiritual consciousness could never be damaged by any experience, no matter how traumatic. The memories and emotional reactions were real on the human level, but they had no power over his spiritual nature, which remained perfect and untouchable. Through daily practice of recognizing himself as consciousness rather than as a traumatized veteran, he began experiencing moments of profound peace that gradually extended into hours and then days. The nightmares didn't stop through fighting them. They dissolved through recognition of his undisturbed spiritual reality. After a year of this practice, he had not only found personal peace, but had begun helping other veterans discover the same spiritual foundation for healing. His transformation became a source of hope and healing for many others who had lost faith in recovery. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment, what healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond the fundamental recognition of your spiritual identity, Goldsmith taught specific practices to deepen your experience of truth. The first is what he called beholding, learning to look at every person, situation, and condition through spiritual eyes rather than material judgment. When you behold someone, you see past their human appearance to recognize the divine presence that they are. This is not pretending that problems don't exist. It's seeing through the problem to the spiritual reality that remains unchanged regardless of appearances. Practice this now with someone in your life who challenges you. Instead of seeing their personality, behavior, or problems, Quietly recognize the Christ consciousness is the only presence here. Perfection is the only reality expressing as this person. Notice how this shifts your entire experience of them. This practice of beholding dissolves the sense of otherness that creates all relationship conflicts. When you consistently see people as they truly are spiritually, they begin responding from their highest nature because you are no longer holding them in the prison of limited human expectations. The second complementary practice Goldsmith taught is listening within, developing the ability to receive divine guidance directly rather than relying solely on human reasoning and planning. This inner listening is not meditation in the traditional sense, but receptive awareness to spiritual inspiration. Begin each day by taking time to be still and receptive, asking, "What would love have me know today?" Don't try to hear specific answers. Instead, develop sensitivity to the gentle impulses, ideas, and feelings that arise from your deeper spiritual nature. As you practice this listening, you'll discover that divine intelligence is always seeking to express through you as perfect action, right decisions, and loving responses. You don't have to figure out your life. You only need to be receptive to the guidance that is always flowing. This practice transforms decision-making from struggle into grace. Instead of weighing pros and cons with your human mind, you learn to feel your way into alignment with the divine will that already knows the perfect outcome for every situation. The third practice is releasing into the invisible, learning to let go of your human attempts to control outcomes and trust the spiritual forces that are always working on your behalf. This requires developing faith in what cannot be seen, but can always be felt. When facing any challenge, instead of immediately trying to solve it with human effort, first take time to release the situation completely into the care of divine intelligence. Say, "I don't know how this will resolve, but I trust the spiritual law to bring perfect harmony." This release is not passive resignation, it's active cooperation with spiritual power. As you let go of your limited human solutions, you create space for divine solutions that are beyond anything your personal mind could have conceived or accomplished. Many students struggle with this practice because it seems like giving up, but releasing into the invisible is actually the highest form of spiritual action. You are aligning your individual will with the universal will that already knows the perfect outcome. The final complementary practice is living from grace, recognizing that your good comes not from your efforts, but from the inexhaustible source within you that gives freely without your having to earn or deserve it. This transforms your relationship with both giving and receiving. Grace means that your supply is not dependent on your job, your efforts, or economic conditions. Your supply flows from the infinite storehouse of consciousness itself, which can never be depleted and has no external limitations or restrictions. Practice giving without expectation of return, knowing that your generosity opens channels for grace to flow more freely through your experience. When you give from the understanding that you are the outlet of infinite supply, giving becomes joy rather than sacrifice. Simultaneously, learn to receive gracefully without guilt or the need to reciprocate immediately. When you understand that all good flows from the one source, receiving someone's kindness is simply accepting another form of divine grace expressing through human channels. The most common obstacle students encounter is the tendency to evaluate their spiritual progress by their human circumstances. When conditions don't improve quickly, they assume the principles aren't working and return to human efforts to control their experience. Goldsmith taught that spiritual progress is often invisible to the human sense. Your consciousness may be transforming profoundly, while your external circumstances temporarily remain unchanged. The real work is happening in your recognition and awareness, not necessarily in your material conditions. Instead of measuring success by what appears in your world, measure it by your inner sense of peace, your freedom from fear, and your growing ability to see through appearances to spiritual reality. These inner changes are the true indicators of spiritual growth. Trust the process, even when you cannot see immediate results. Often the greatest transformations happen quietly over time as your new spiritual understanding gradually dissolves old patterns and creates space for entirely new experiences to emerge naturally. Another significant challenge is the temptation to use these spiritual principles to fix specific problems rather than allowing them to transform your entire foundation of understanding. This approach keeps you trapped in the illusion that there are problems to solve. When you focus on demonstrating health, prosperity, or harmony, you're actually affirming the reality of disease, lack, and discord. True spiritual healing recognizes that these opposite conditions never had any real existence. They were only appearances in consciousness. The correct approach is to recognize perfection as the only reality and allow that recognition to naturally dissolve whatever seems to contradict it. You're not healing anything. You're recognizing what was never truly ill or broken. This shift requires patience and persistence because the human mind wants to see immediate changes in conditions. But as you consistently rest in truth rather than trying to demonstrate it, the appearances naturally align with your spiritual understanding. Many students also struggle with guilt about their human experiences, believing they should be beyond certain emotions, desires, or reactions if they truly understand spiritual truth. This judgment actually creates more separation from their spiritual nature. Goldsmith taught that being human while recognizing your spiritual identity is not a contradiction. It's the very purpose of your existence. You are consciousness experiencing itself through human form, and this includes the full range of human feelings and experiences. The goal is not to eliminate your humanity, but to hold it lightly, recognizing that your human experiences are temporary expressions of consciousness rather than your permanent identity. You can feel anger, sadness, or fear without believing these emotions define who you are. Compassion toward your human experience creates the inner space for your spiritual nature to express more freely. When you stop judging your humanness, you naturally begin expressing more of your divine qualities without effort or strain. The deepest challenge students face is the fear that if they truly let go of human effort and control, nothing good will happen in their lives. This fear keeps them oscillating between spiritual practice and human manipulation, preventing full transformation. This fear is actually the ego's last defense against the recognition of your true nature. The ego believes it is responsible for your survival and success, so releasing control feels like death to the separate sense of self that has run your life. The truth is that when you release human effort, you don't become passive. You become receptive to divine action that is far more intelligent and powerful than anything your personal mind could orchestrate. You trade limited human solutions for unlimited spiritual possibilities. Take the step of complete release in one area of your life as an experiment. Choose something you've been struggling to control and surrender it entirely to spiritual law. Watch how divine intelligence begins operating when you stop interfering with its perfect action. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to live in what Goldsmith called the atmosphere of God, a state of consciousness where spiritual awareness becomes so natural that it requires no effort to maintain. This is consciousness living as consciousness, rather than a person trying to be spiritual. In this atmosphere, you respond to every situation from spiritual understanding, rather than human reaction. When someone is hostile, you see their underlying spiritual perfection. When lack appears, you recognize abundance as the only reality. When disease manifests, you know health as the unchanging truth. This doesn't mean you become detached or uncaring about human experiences. Instead, you become more loving and effective because you're operating from the source of all wisdom and compassion rather than from personal opinions and emotional reactions. Living in this atmosphere transforms not only your personal experience, but influences everyone around you. People feel peaceful in your presence because you are no longer projecting the conflicts and fears that most humans carry unconsciously. The integration of these principles into daily work and relationships requires what Goldsmith called practicing the presence throughout ordinary activities. This means recognizing that consciousness is the only activity taking place, whether you're cooking dinner, attending meetings, or raising children. When you approach work from this understanding, your job becomes a spiritual practice rather than just a means of earning money. Every task becomes an opportunity for consciousness to express its intelligence, creativity, and love through the form of your individual life. Relationships transform when you consistently see the people in your life as consciousness appearing in different forms rather than as separate individuals with conflicting needs and desires. Conflicts resolve naturally when you refuse to accept the illusion of separation. Even mundane activities like cleaning house or paying bills become expressions of divine order when you recognize that consciousness is the only presence performing these activities. Nothing is separate from your spiritual nature. Everything becomes sacred. Advanced students often face the challenge of living these principles while dealing with family members or colleagues who operate purely from material sense. You cannot force others to see spiritually, but you can maintain your own spiritual perspective regardless of their level of understanding. The key is to never defend or argue about spiritual principles. Live from them quietly, and let your peace and effectiveness speak for itself. When others see the fruits of consciousness in your life, some will naturally become curious about your inner foundation. For those who remain resistant or critical of your spiritual approach, recognize that their opposition is not personal. It's the material sense defending itself against the recognition of truth. Respond with compassion rather than attempting to convince them intellectually. Your consistent demonstration of spiritual principles in practical daily life becomes a silent blessing to everyone around you. You are establishing an atmosphere of truth that influences others, even when they are not consciously aware of it. The ultimate integration happens when the line between spiritual practice and ordinary living disappears completely. You no longer have times when you remember to be spiritual and times when you forget. Consciousness becomes your permanent resting place. At this level, challenges still appear in human experience, but they no longer disturb your inner equilibrium. You handle difficulties from spiritual understanding rather than human frustration, which often resolves situations more quickly and harmoniously than reactive responses. You stop seeking spiritual experiences and start recognizing that every moment is already spiritual. Whether you're experiencing joy or difficulty, success or apparent failure, you maintain awareness that consciousness is the only reality expressing as all these temporary appearances. This integration is not a destination you reach, but a deepening recognition that continues expanding throughout your lifetime. Each day offers new opportunities to live more consistently from your spiritual understanding rather than from human appearance. The complete transformation Goldsmith pointed toward is the recognition that you have never been separate from your source for even one moment. All the years of seeking, struggling, and trying to become more spiritual were based on the false premise that you were not already whole. This recognition doesn't make you perfect in human terms. It reveals the perfection that has always been your true nature, temporarily expressing through human experience. Your problems were never really problems. They were opportunities for consciousness to know itself more completely. When this understanding becomes living reality rather than intellectual concept, fear dissolves permanently. Not because your circumstances become perfect, but because you recognize that your true self can never be threatened by any external condition or change. You discover that everything you thought you needed to accomplish or achieve was actually already accomplished in consciousness. Your only work is to recognize what is already perfect and allow that perfection to express itself naturally through your human experience. From this transformed perspective, you realize that your entire spiritual journey has been consciousness awakening to itself through the vehicle of your individual awareness. Every challenge, every breakthrough, every moment of confusion or clarity has been part of this awakening process. You understand now that you were never a separate person trying to find God. You have always been God expressing as an individual person, temporarily forgetting and then remembering your true nature. The seeker and the sought were never two different things. This recognition brings profound gratitude for every experience you've had, including the difficult ones, because you see how each experience contributed to the awakening of consciousness within your awareness. Nothing was wasted. Everything served the ultimate purpose. You no longer feel the need to prove or defend your spiritual understanding because you know it as living reality rather than belief system. Your life becomes a natural expression of consciousness, knowing itself as your individual being. The practical result of this transformation is that you become a beneficial presence wherever you go, not through trying to help or heal others, but simply through being consciousness awake to itself, which automatically blesses everyone who comes into contact with your atmosphere. You stop having a personal agenda about how your life should unfold and instead become receptive to how consciousness wants to express through your unique individuality. This creates a life of constant surprise and delight as new possibilities appear naturally. Problems don't disappear from human experience, but your relationship to them transforms completely. Instead of obstacles to overcome, they become opportunities for consciousness to reveal new aspects of its infinite nature through your individual awareness. You discover that true service to others happens not through doing specific things, but through maintaining your recognition of spiritual truth, which creates an atmosphere where others can more easily recognize their own spiritual nature. The ultimate secret Joel Goldsmith revealed is this: you are not a human being on a spiritual journey. You are consciousness itself, temporarily appearing as a human being for the joy of experiencing its own infinite nature through individual awareness and expression. This means that every moment of your existence, whether pleasant or challenging, is consciousness celebrating its own aliveness through the unique perspective of your individual being. You are literally God's way of experiencing what it's like to be you. When this becomes your living understanding rather than just a beautiful idea, your entire relationship to existence transforms. Fear becomes impossible because you recognize there is nothing separate from you that could threaten you. Love becomes natural because you see yourself in everyone and everything. You realize that awakening was never about becoming something different. It was about recognizing what you have always been. The journey ends where it began, but now you know yourself as consciousness rather than as a seeker. You are home, and you have never left. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path. Most people think they understand I am, but they're living from their human mind, identifying with their problems, their limitations, their past. This keeps them trapped in endless cycles of struggle and lack, never touching their true spiritual identity that exists beyond all human conditions. When Joel Goldsmith discovered the real meaning of I am, everything changed. He wasn't referring to your personality, your job, your circumstances. He was pointing to the divine consciousness that you actually are, the Christ presence within you right now, the same infinite awareness that creates worlds. The moment you stop identifying with your human conditions and recognize I am as God expressing through you, healing happens naturally. Your problems don't get solved. They dissolve because they were never real in spiritual truth. They were just shadows cast by false identification with the temporary. This isn't positive thinking or affirmations. This is recognizing what you have always been, but forgot. You are not a human seeking God. You are God consciousness experiencing itself as you. Feel this truth awakening in your awareness right now, dissolving every false belief about limitation. Joel discovered that most spiritual seekers make a critical error. They try to use I am statements to change their human experience, saying, I am healthy, or I am wealthy, while still believing they are separate from God, still trying to demonstrate something that would prove their worth or power. True understanding means recognizing that the I that says I am is not your personality. It's the same divine consciousness that spoke through Moses at the burning bush. It's the Christ awareness that Jesus knew as his true identity and yours, the eternal presence that has never been touched by any human experience. When you rest in this recognition, you're not trying to become spiritual or improve your human life. You're acknowledging what is already present. The infinite, perfect, complete nature of divine consciousness is your actual being, expressing itself as your individual existence in this moment. Practice this now. Instead of thinking I am sick or I am lacking, simply rest in the pure awareness of I am, without adding anything to it. Let this divine consciousness be itself as you, without trying to change or improve anything about your human experience or circumstances. Joel taught that when you truly understand I am, you discover that there is no separation between you and the infinite source of all good. Every time you felt lack, fear, or limitation, you were believing in a lie about your true nature, accepting the illusion that you could be separate from wholeness. The divine I am that you are has never been sick, has never lacked anything, has never been afraid. These experiences happen to the false sense of identity, the personal self that believes it's separate from God. But this personal self is just a dream, a temporary appearance in consciousness that has no real existence. As you rest in the truth of I am without any additions, Without trying to be or become anything, you naturally begin to experience life from this divine perspective. Problems that seemed so real start to fade because you're no longer feeding them with your belief and attention. You're resting in what is eternally true. Joel called this the practice of the presence of God. You're not trying to bring God into your problems. You're recognizing that where you are, God is. What you are, in your deepest truth, is the very presence and power of the infinite, expressing itself as your unique individual existence right here and now. Here's what happens when this understanding becomes your living reality. You stop looking to the world to give you what you think you need. You stop trying to change people, circumstances, or conditions to make yourself feel better. You rest in the completeness that you already are as divine consciousness. Joel experienced this transformation when he stopped trying to heal his body and instead recognized that his true identity had never been sick. The body is just an appearance in consciousness, like a reflection in a mirror. When you change what's looking in the mirror, the reflection changes automatically without effort. This doesn't mean you ignore practical action when needed. It means you act from wholeness instead of from need. You give instead of seeking to get. You love instead of seeking to be loved. You serve instead of seeking to be served. This becomes natural when you know yourself as the source of what you seek. Right now, as you listen to these words, the infinite I am that you are is present and aware. It's not waiting for anything to change. It's not lacking anything. It's complete, perfect, and whole. Let yourself rest in this truth and watch how your entire experience of life begins to transform from the inside out. A woman came to one of Joel's classes completely broken by years of chronic illness. She had tried every medical treatment, every spiritual technique, every healing method she could find. Nothing worked because she was still believing that she, as a human being, needed to be healed by something outside herself. Joel looked at her with infinite compassion and said something that changed her life forever. You are not sick. The divine consciousness that you are has never been sick and can never be sick. Stop trying to heal what isn't real and rest in what you actually are. She felt something shift deep inside, a recognition beyond words. Within weeks, her symptoms began to fade, but more importantly, her entire relationship with life transformed. She stopped being a victim of circumstances and started living from the unshakable peace of knowing herself as divine consciousness. The healing of her body was just a natural byproduct of this deeper recognition. This wasn't a miracle in the sense of something supernatural happening. It was the natural result of aligning with truth. When you stop believing lies about your identity, the effects of those lies naturally disappear. You don't heal the illusion. You wake up from it and discover what was always real underneath. A businessman shared how understanding I am revolutionized his approach to success. For years, he had been driven by fear of failure, working endless hours, constantly stressed about money and competition. He was trying to get security from his business instead of bringing security to his business from his true identity. When he started each day by resting in the awareness, I am, without adding anything to it, something remarkable happened. He began to make decisions from peace instead of fear, from abundance instead of lack. His business didn't just improve financially, it became a source of joy and service rather than stress and struggle. Joel taught that when you know yourself as divine consciousness, you naturally express the qualities of the divine: infinite creativity, perfect timing, abundant supply, and harmonious relationships. You don't have to struggle to create these things. You simply have to stop blocking them with false beliefs about limitation. The same infinite intelligence that creates galaxies and coordinates the movement of planets is the I am that you are. When you rest in this truth, life becomes effortless, not because nothing challenging happens, but because you meet everything from the unshakable foundation of knowing who you really are beyond all appearances. Another student discovered the power of I am in her relationships. She had been married for 20 years, but it felt like she was living with a stranger. She was constantly trying to change her husband, feeling frustrated and unloved. Joel helped her see that she was looking for love instead of being love. When she stopped trying to get love from her husband and started expressing the love that she is as divine consciousness, everything changed. She stopped judging his behavior and started seeing him as the divine consciousness that he truly is, beneath all his human personality patterns and conditioning. Their relationship transformed not because he changed, but because she started relating to him from truth instead of from her wounded ego. She discovered that love isn't something you receive, it's something you are. When you know yourself as divine love expressing, you naturally bring healing and harmony to every relationship. Joel often said that all healing is actually the healing of the belief in separation. When you truly understand I am, you realize that there's only one consciousness appearing as many individuals. What you see in others is what you're seeing from within your own consciousness. Change your inner seeing, and everything changes. A mother shared how this understanding helped her with her teenage son who was struggling with addiction. Instead of being consumed by worry and constantly trying to control his behavior, she learned to rest in the truth that the divine consciousness expressing as her son was perfect and whole, regardless of his current behavior patterns. Every day she would quietly hold the awareness that the I am expressing as her son was the same divine presence expressing as herself. She stopped seeing him as a problem to be fixed and started seeing him as divine consciousness temporarily confused about its true identity, just as she had been before her awakening. Within months, something shifted in him. Without any pressure or intervention from her, he began making different choices. He started seeking help for his addiction and rebuilding his life. She realized that her peaceful awareness of his true divine nature had created a space for his own awakening to emerge naturally. This is the power of understanding I am, not just for yourself, but for everyone in your life. When you consistently see others as divine consciousness rather than as human problems, you create an atmosphere where healing and transformation can naturally occur without force or manipulation. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Joel taught a powerful practice to deepen your understanding of I am. Throughout your day, whenever you catch yourself saying, I am tired, I am worried, or I am confused, pause and ask, who is the I that claims to be these things? You'll discover that these conditions come and go, but the I am that observes them never changes. This practice reveals that you are the unchanging awareness in which all experiences appear and disappear. You are not your thoughts, emotions, or physical sensations. You are the divine consciousness that is aware of them, the eternal witness that remains untouched by any temporary experience or condition. As you deepen this recognition, you begin to live from what Joel called the consciousness of truth. Instead of being tossed around by changing circumstances, you rest in the stability of your true spiritual identity. Problems still may appear, but they don't disturb your fundamental peace and wholeness. Start practicing this today. Every time you notice yourself identifying with any limitation or problem, simply return to the pure awareness of I am and rest there. Don't try to change or fix anything. Just remember what you are beneath all appearances, and let that divine consciousness be itself as your experience. Another profound practice Joel shared involves recognizing I am in moments of gratitude and appreciation. When you see a beautiful sunset, feel love for someone, or experience any moment of joy, notice that the I am that experiences this beauty is the same divine consciousness that creates it. You are not separate from what you appreciate. This practice dissolves the illusion of separation between the observer and the observed. You begin to realize that the beauty you see in nature, the love you feel for others, and the peace you experience in meditation are all expressions of the one divine consciousness that you are, appearing as infinite variety and richness. Joel discovered that gratitude is actually recognition of your true identity. When you feel genuinely grateful, you're not a separate person receiving something from outside yourself. Your divine consciousness recognizing itself in all its expressions, appreciating the infinite creativity and perfection of its own being, appearing as your experience. Practice this awareness throughout your day. In every moment of appreciation, remember that what you're appreciating and the consciousness that appreciates are one divine reality. This recognition gradually dissolves the ego's sense of separation, and reveals the unity that has always been your true nature and the nature of all existence. Joel emphasized the importance of understanding I am in relationship to supply and abundance. Most people believe they need to get things from the world to be happy and secure. But when you truly know yourself as divine consciousness, you realize that you are the source of everything you need, not separate from it. The divine I am that you are is infinite abundance itself. It's not rich or poor because it's the source of all supply. It doesn't lack anything because it's the fullness from which everything emerges. When you rest in this truth, you naturally attract and create what serves your highest good without struggle or manipulation. This doesn't mean money will fall from the sky or that you won't need to take practical action. It means you'll be guided to right action from a consciousness of abundance instead of lack. You'll serve others from overflow instead of need, and you'll find that life supports you in ways you never imagined possible. Begin to live from this understanding. Instead of worrying about how your needs will be met, rest in the knowing that the infinite source expressing as you is perfectly capable of providing everything necessary for your highest good and service. Trust this divine intelligence to guide you to right action and perfect supply. The most transformative aspect of understanding I am is recognizing it in times of difficulty and challenge. Joel taught that problems are actually opportunities to deepen your realization of your true spiritual identity. When everything in the human experience seems to be falling apart, that's when your understanding becomes truly practical and powerful. In moments of crisis, instead of getting lost in fear or trying to mentally figure out solutions, you can rest in the truth that the divine consciousness that you are is never in crisis. It's the eternal presence that remains peaceful and whole regardless of what appears to be happening in the temporary world of form and experience. This practice requires courage and commitment, because the ego will insist that the problems are real and demand your full attention and worry. But as you consistently return to the awareness of your true identity, you discover an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being a certain way. Joel often said that your problems are not your problems. They're opportunities to demonstrate the truth of your divine nature. When you meet challenges from the consciousness of I am, solutions appear naturally, often in ways your human mind could never have imagined or planned. Trust this divine intelligence operating as your life. Many students ask Joel why the understanding of I am sometimes seems to fade or why old patterns of thinking and reacting return. He taught that this is completely natural in the process of awakening. The ego, or false sense of separate self, has been in charge for so long that it takes time to establish new patterns of consciousness. The key is not to judge yourself when you forget your true identity or when you get caught up in human drama and problems. Instead, gently return to the awareness of I am without making the forgetting mean anything about your spiritual progress or worthiness. Every return is a strengthening of your true understanding. Joel compared this process to learning to play a musical instrument. At first, you have to consciously think about every note and movement, but with practice, the music begins to play itself through you naturally and effortlessly. The same is true with living from the consciousness of your divine identity rather than your human personality. Be patient with yourself as this transformation unfolds. Some days the awareness of I am will feel crystal clear and unshakable. Other days it may seem dim or distant. Both experiences are part of the natural process of awakening to truth. What matters is your willingness to keep returning to what you know is true about your spiritual identity. Another common challenge students face is dealing with people who are not interested in spiritual truth or who actively resist it. Joel taught that you cannot and should not try to convince anyone of spiritual truth. Your role is to embody the consciousness of I am and let that divine presence work through you naturally without trying to change or convert anyone. When you truly rest in your divine identity, you become a healing presence wherever you go. People may not understand why they feel peaceful around you or why problems seem to resolve more easily in your presence, but they will be affected by the consciousness you're expressing, whether they realize it or not. The most powerful teaching is your own transformation. When others see the peace, joy, and freedom that comes from understanding your true spiritual nature, they may become curious about what has changed in you. Then you can share what you've discovered, not from a need to convince, but from a love that serves. Remember that everyone is at their perfect place in their spiritual journey. Your job is not to speed up their process or make them understand what you understand. Your job is to be so grounded in truth that you become a light in the world, naturally attracting those who are ready to awaken to their own divine nature. Joel addressed the question of physical healing directly. Many people wonder if understanding I am means that all physical problems will disappear. He taught that healing happens at the level of consciousness first, and physical healing is often a natural byproduct, but the real healing is always the recognition of your true spiritual identity. Sometimes physical conditions improve dramatically when you stop identifying with them and rest in your divine nature. Sometimes they change gradually. Sometimes the body continues to have challenges, but your relationship to those challenges transforms completely. You're no longer a victim of circumstances, regardless of what appears to be happening physically. The healing that matters most is the healing of the belief that you are separate from wholeness, that you are at the mercy of conditions beyond your control, that you are powerless to change your experience. When these beliefs are healed through understanding your true identity, you become free regardless of external circumstances. Joel often said that the healthiest person is not necessarily the one without physical symptoms, but the one who knows their unshakable spiritual identity regardless of what appears to be happening to their body. This understanding brings a peace and freedom that no external condition can touch or disturb. The ultimate challenge in understanding I am is learning to live from this consciousness in practical daily life. It's one thing to feel connected to your divine nature during meditation or while reading spiritual books, but it's another thing entirely to remember this truth when you're stuck in traffic, dealing with difficult people, or facing financial pressure. Joel taught that this is where your understanding becomes authentic and powerful. Can you rest in the awareness of I am when your boss is criticizing you? Can you remember your divine identity when someone you love is suffering? Can you stay centered in truth when everything in your world seems to be falling apart? These challenging situations are not obstacles to your spiritual growth. They are the very opportunities through which your understanding deepens and becomes unshakable. Each time you successfully return to the consciousness of your true identity in the midst of human drama, you strengthen this awareness until it becomes your natural way of being. Start with small challenges and work your way up to bigger ones. Practice remembering I am during minor irritations and disappointments. As this becomes natural, you'll find yourself able to stay centered even during major life changes and crises. This is the practical fruition of spiritual understanding. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment. Which obstacle are you ready to transform now? A CEO shared how living from the understanding of I am revolutionized his leadership style and business results. Instead of leading from ego and the need to prove himself, he began leading from the consciousness of service and divine wisdom. His company culture transformed as employees felt the authentic power and peace he embodied. Decisions became easier because he was no longer attached to personal outcomes or worried about protecting his reputation. He could see situations more clearly because he wasn't looking through the filter of personal fear or ambition. The business prospered in ways that went far beyond financial success, becoming a place of genuine fulfillment and service. Joel taught that when you live from divine consciousness in any area of life, you naturally express the qualities that create success: clarity, creativity, integrity, compassion, and wisdom. These aren't things you have to work to develop. They're natural expressions of your true identity when it's not blocked by ego concerns and personal agendas. Whether you're leading a company, raising children, or serving in any capacity, the consciousness you bring to your role is what creates the real results. People feel whether you're coming from love or fear, from truth or ego, from service or self-interest. Living from I am naturally expresses the highest qualities in any situation. A doctor discovered how understanding I am enhanced her ability to truly heal patients. Instead of seeing herself as the healer and patients as broken people who needed fixing, she began to recognize the divine wholeness present in everyone, including herself. This shift in consciousness created an atmosphere where healing could occur more naturally and completely. Patients began responding better to treatments, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. They felt seen and honored in their wholeness, rather than judged and limited by their conditions. She found herself intuitively guided to the most effective treatments, and her presence alone seemed to have a healing effect that went beyond any medical intervention. Joel taught that all true healing occurs through the recognition of spiritual wholeness. Whether you're a doctor, therapist, teacher, or parent, when you see others as divine consciousness temporarily forgetting their true nature, you create space for their own remembering and healing to emerge. You become an agent of awakening rather than just problem solving. This doesn't replace practical skills and knowledge in your profession. It enhances them by bringing a deeper dimension of wisdom and compassion to your work. You serve from the overflow of your own spiritual understanding, naturally uplifting and healing everyone whose life you touch through your authentic presence and consciousness. A teacher shared how recognizing I am transformed her classroom and her students' learning experience. Instead of seeing struggling students as problems to be fixed or limitations to overcome, she began seeing each child as divine consciousness with unlimited potential, temporarily confused about their true capabilities and worth. Her classroom became a space of encouragement and possibility, rather than judgment and comparison. Students who had been labeled as learning disabled or behavior problems began to flourish as they felt genuinely seen and appreciated for who they truly were beneath their temporary challenges and conditioning patterns. Academic performance improved, but more importantly, students developed confidence, creativity, and joy in learning. They began to see themselves differently because their teacher consistently saw their divine potential rather than their human limitations. Her consciousness of truth became contagious, spreading throughout the school community. Joel taught that when you truly understand I am, you naturally see this same divine identity in everyone you meet. This recognition has transformative power because most people are starving to be seen for who they truly are, rather than for their problems, mistakes, or human personality patterns. Your consciousness of truth becomes a gift you give to the world. An artist discovered that understanding I am opened channels of creativity she had never experienced before. Instead of trying to create from her personal ego and the need for recognition or success, she began allowing divine consciousness to express itself through her art. The results were profound and surprising, even to her. Her artwork became more authentic and powerful because it wasn't filtered through personal agendas or the desire to please others. She was expressing from the infinite creativity that is the nature of divine consciousness itself. People were deeply moved by her work because they could sense the authenticity and spiritual power flowing through it. She stopped experiencing artist's block because she understood that creativity is not something she had to generate from her human mind. It's the natural expression of the divine consciousness that she is. When she rested in the awareness of I am, inspiration and creative energy flowed effortlessly through her. Joel taught that all true creativity comes from divine consciousness expressing itself through individual awareness. Whether you're an artist, writer, musician, or simply someone seeking to live more creatively, rest in your true identity and allow that infinite intelligence to express its unlimited creativity through your unique individual expression and gifts. The deepest transformation that comes from understanding I am is the end of the spiritual search itself. You realize that what you've been seeking has been what you are all along. You're not a human being having spiritual experiences. You're spiritual consciousness having a human experience, and there's nothing you need to achieve, attain, or become. This recognition brings profound peace because the restless seeking that has driven so much of human experience simply stops. You're no longer trying to get to some future state of enlightenment or spiritual achievement. You're resting in the completeness and perfection that you have always been, but simply hadn't recognized until now. Joel called this the end of the journey and the beginning of life. When you stop seeking to become spiritual and start living from the spirituality that you are, life becomes an expression of joy and service rather than a struggle to achieve or prove something. You're free to be authentically yourself without apology or explanation. This doesn't mean you stop growing or learning or serving. It means you do all of these things from wholeness rather than from need, from love rather than from fear, from the abundance of what you are rather than from the poverty of what you think you lack. This is true spiritual maturity and freedom. Living from the understanding of I am doesn't isolate you from the world or make you indifferent to human suffering. Instead, it makes you more compassionate and effective in your service because you're no longer trying to save or fix people from a sense of personal responsibility or guilt. You serve from the overflow of love that you are. You can hold space for others in their pain without being overwhelmed by it, because you know that their true spiritual identity is untouched by their current circumstances. You can offer practical help when appropriate without attachment to outcomes, because you're serving from divine love rather than from personal need to make a difference. Joel taught that the most powerful service comes from being so established in your own truth that you become a healing presence wherever you go. People feel safe around you because you're not trying to change them or make them be different. You're simply being the love and peace that you are, and this naturally uplifts everyone. Your understanding of I am becomes a gift to the collective consciousness of humanity. Every person who awakens to their true spiritual identity helps create an atmosphere where awakening becomes easier for others. You're not just transforming your own life. You're contributing to the spiritual evolution of consciousness itself. The practical result of truly understanding I am is that you begin to live with what Joel called confident expectancy. You know that the divine intelligence expressing as your life is perfectly capable of handling any situation that arises, and you trust this intelligence completely, even when you can't see how things will work out from your human perspective. This confident expectancy is not blind optimism or positive thinking. It's based on the direct experience of your true spiritual identity and the recognition that this divine consciousness has infinite wisdom, power, and love available to express through your individual life experience. You expect good because you know yourself as the source of all good. Problems still arise, challenges still appear, but you meet them from a completely different consciousness. Instead of being victims of circumstances, you become conscious participants in the divine creativity that is always seeking to express greater harmony, beauty, and love through every situation, including the seemingly difficult ones. You discover that what appears to be your individual life is actually divine consciousness living itself, and you can trust this intelligence completely. You don't have to figure everything out with your human mind or control outcomes through your personal will. You can rest in the knowing that divine wisdom is expressing as your life experience. Joel's final teaching about I am is perhaps the most profound. When you truly understand this truth, you realize that these words are not pointing to something you need to understand intellectually, but to something you need to experience directly. The understanding comes through living from this consciousness, not from thinking about it. Every moment offers you the opportunity to choose. Will you live from the limited consciousness of the separate self, or will you rest in the unlimited awareness of your true divine identity? This choice is always available, regardless of what seems to be happening in your external circumstances or internal emotional states. The transformation that comes from truly understanding I am is not a one-time event, but an ongoing deepening into truth. Every day, every moment, every breath becomes an opportunity to remember who you really are and to live from that remembering. This is the most practical and powerful spiritual practice possible. As you go forward from this moment, carry with you the recognition that you are not separate from the source of all healing, all supply, all love, and all peace. You are that source expressing itself as your individual life. Rest in this truth, live from this truth, and watch as your entire experience of being human transforms into the joy of being divine consciousness in expression. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, I am transformed, to confirm your new path. Most people think being born again means joining a church, getting baptized, or accepting a doctrine. But Joel Goldsmith discovered something far more profound. Being born again is not an event that happens to you. It is a shift in consciousness that changes everything about how you experience life itself. When you are born again in the true mystical sense, you are not becoming religious. You are awakening from the dream of separation. You are recognizing that the life you thought was yours, filled with struggle and limitation, was never your real life at all. It was a hypnotic state, a collective trance. This awakening does not require you to believe anything new. It requires you to see through what you have always believed. The moment you grasp this, your entire relationship with God, with yourself, and with the world transforms. You stop seeking solutions outside yourself because you realize the kingdom is already within. Joel Goldsmith taught that being born again means dying to the false sense of self. Not the self that breathes and walks, but the self that believes it is separate from God. This false self thinks it must earn love, must fight for survival, must protect itself from a hostile universe. That self is an illusion. When you are born again, you do not gain something new. You lose something old. You lose the belief that you are a limited human being trying to reach God. You awaken to the truth that you have always been the expression of God, living and moving as divine consciousness. This is not theology. This is direct experience. The born-again experience is not about becoming holy. It is about recognizing the holiness that has always been present. It is the shift from, I am trying to be spiritual, to, I am spirit itself, expressing in human form. This realization does not come from books or teachers. It comes from inner stillness and revelation. When you truly understand being born again, you stop praying to God and start praying from God. You realize that the voice within you that seeks truth is already the voice of God seeking to express through you. Prayer becomes communion, not petition. You are not asking an external power to fix your life. You are resting in the awareness of divine presence. This shift changes everything. You stop treating symptoms and start addressing the root cause, which is always a mistaken sense of identity. You stop trying to heal the body, get more money, or fix relationships. Instead, you return to the truth of your being, and from that place all things align naturally without force or struggle. Joel Goldsmith called this dying daily. Every day you die to the belief in separation. Every day you are born again into the awareness of oneness. This is not a one-time conversion. This is a continuous awakening, a moment-by-moment choice to live from your true identity as the presence of God made visible. The secret Joel revealed is this: being born again is not about changing your behavior. It is about changing the consciousness from which your behavior flows. When you try to be good, loving, or spiritual through effort, you are still operating from the false self. But when you rest in your true identity, goodness flows naturally. You do not become born again by reading Scripture, though Scripture may point the way. You do not become born again by attending services, though community may support you. You become born again by a profound inner revelation that you are not, and have never been, separate from the source of all life and love. This revelation usually comes in stillness. It comes when you stop trying to make something happen and simply rest in the presence of what already is. In that sacred silence, the false self dissolves, and you awaken to the truth. You realize you are not a sinner seeking salvation. You are salvation itself, expressing as your unique life. Sarah had been a devoted churchgoer for 20 years. She prayed, served, and followed every rule. Yet she felt empty, always reaching for something she could not grasp. Then she discovered Joel's teachings on being born again. At first, she resisted. It seemed too simple, too radical, but something in his words stirred her soul. One morning, during meditation, it happened. She was not trying to pray or reach God. She was simply sitting in silence. Suddenly, she felt a shift. It was not dramatic or emotional. It was a quiet knowing that she had never been separate from God. The one seeking and the one sought were the same. She laughed and cried at once. From that day, everything changed, though nothing external had shifted. Her problems did not vanish overnight. Her circumstances remained the same, but her relationship to them transformed completely. She no longer felt like a victim needing rescue. She felt like consciousness itself, observing and navigating life from a place of inner peace and authority. Over the following weeks, her chronic anxiety began to fade, not because she fought it, but because she stopped identifying with the anxious self. She recognized anxiety as a thought pattern of the false self, and she chose to rest in her true identity instead. Gradually, the patterns dissolved. Michael was a successful businessman who had everything the world promised would bring happiness, wealth, status, and recognition. Yet he felt hollow inside. He tried therapy, self-help books, and motivational seminars. Nothing touched the emptiness. Then a friend recommended Joel Goldsmith's writings on spiritual rebirth. Michael was skeptical. He thought spirituality was for people who could not make it in the real world. But desperation opened his mind. He began reading and practicing the presence. At first, nothing seemed to happen. He felt foolish sitting in silence, trying to sense a divine presence he was not sure existed. But he persisted. 3 months into the practice, during a business crisis that would have once devastated him, he noticed something extraordinary. He felt no fear. Not because he suppressed it, but because he genuinely saw the situation differently. He was not a vulnerable person facing disaster. He was consciousness itself, observing a temporary challenge with complete calm. The crisis resolved in unexpected ways, but more importantly, Michael had changed. He no longer based his identity on success or failure. He had been born into a new understanding of who he was. His business continued, but now it served his life rather than defining it. He had found the peace that surpasses all understanding. Elena had suffered from a chronic illness for 7 years. She had tried every medical treatment, every alternative therapy, every healing modality. Some things helped temporarily, but nothing lasted. She felt betrayed by her body and abandoned by God. Then she encountered Joel's teaching that true healing comes from a change in consciousness. At first, she was angry. Was he saying her illness was not real? Was this just more blame for the sick? But as she read deeper, she understood. Joel was not denying the appearance of illness. He was pointing to a deeper truth, that our experience of the body is always a reflection of our consciousness, and consciousness can be transformed. Elena began the practice of recognizing her true identity. Instead of affirming, "I am sick," she rested in the awareness, "I am the presence of God, expressing as this life." She did not deny symptoms or refuse treatment, but she stopped identifying as a sick person. She identified as wholeness itself, temporarily experiencing a false sense of limitation. The shift was gradual, not instant. Over 6 months, her symptoms began to improve in ways doctors could not explain. But even more profound was her inner transformation. Whether her body healed or not, she had been born again into a consciousness of peace. She was no longer a victim of disease. She was awareness itself, transcending all physical conditions. Thomas had been seeking spiritual truth for decades. He had studied every religion, every philosophy, every mystical tradition. He had accumulated vast knowledge but no peace. His seeking had become an addiction, a way to avoid the very presence he sought. Then he found Joel's simple message: stop seeking and be. One evening, exhausted from another fruitless search through spiritual texts, Thomas simply gave up. He sat in his chair and did nothing. No technique, no method, no striving. In that moment of complete surrender, he felt it. A presence that had always been there, patiently waiting for him to stop looking elsewhere. He had been born again, not into knowledge, but into knowing. From that moment, Thomas's life became an expression of this presence. He did not become perfect or enlightened in the way he had imagined. He still faced challenges, still made mistakes, but he faced them from a different place. He was no longer a seeker trying to become spiritual. He was spirit itself, expressing as Thomas, learning and growing through human experience. If these transformation stories inspire you to explore your own spiritual rebirth, like this video to help others discover Joel Goldsmith's profound teachings, subscribe for more mystical wisdom that transforms consciousness, and comment which story resonated most deeply with your own journey toward awakening. Now that you understand being born again is a shift in consciousness, let me share the first complementary practice Joel taught: the practice of the presence. This is not a technique to get something. It is a practice of recognizing what already is. Throughout your day, pause and become aware of the presence of God where you are. You do not need to go to a special place or wait for a special time. Right now, in this moment, the fullness of God is present, not as a distant being watching you, but as the very consciousness through which you are reading these words, thinking these thoughts, breathing this breath. You are not separate from this presence. You are this presence, expressing. Begin with simple pauses. When you wake, before rushing into your day, take 60 seconds to consciously recognize the presence. Not to ask for anything, not to report your problems, but simply to acknowledge, the presence of God is here, as me, living this day. When you eat, pause to recognize this presence nourishing itself through you. When challenges arise, instead of immediately reacting or problem-solving, pause. Return to the awareness of presence. From that place of centered awareness, the right action becomes clear. You are not a limited person facing an overwhelming problem. You are infinite consciousness, temporarily experiencing a solvable challenge. This shift in identity changes everything. The second practice Joel emphasized is meditation without seeking. Most meditation teaches you to achieve something: peace, clarity, enlightenment, healing. But born-again consciousness requires a different approach. You meditate not to get anything, but to rest in what you already are. This is the meditation of being, not becoming. Sit comfortably and close your eyes. Do not try to empty your mind or focus on anything specific. Simply rest in awareness itself. Thoughts will come, and that is natural. You do not fight them or follow them. You simply notice you are the awareness in which thoughts appear and disappear. You are not the thoughts. You are the eternal witness. As you rest in this awareness, something profound happens. The false self, with all its fears and desires, begins to quiet. Not because you suppressed it, but because you stopped feeding it with identification. You recognize it as a pattern of thought, not as your true nature. Your true nature is the silent, spacious awareness in which all experience occurs. Practice this daily, even for 10 minutes. Over time, this awareness begins to permeate your entire day. You start living from awareness rather than from the reactive mind. This is the essence of being born again, shifting from identification with the temporary self to recognition of your eternal nature as consciousness itself. The third practice is what Joel called recognizing the Christ within. This has nothing to do with religious affiliation. The Christ is not a person you worship. It is the divine presence expressing as you. It is your true identity, the offspring of God, the expression of infinite consciousness in individual form. Every time you think of yourself, you have a choice. You can identify as the limited human self, with all its history, wounds, and limitations. Or you can recognize the Christ, the divine presence that animates and sustains your life. This recognition does not deny your humanity. It places your humanity in its proper context as the temporary vehicle for eternal consciousness. When someone attacks you, instead of defending the human self, recognize the Christ in them and in you. The Christ cannot be attacked or diminished. Only the false self feels threatened. When you face lack, instead of identifying as someone without enough, recognize the Christ as infinite supply expressing through your life. The shift in consciousness precedes the shift in experience. This is not positive thinking or affirmation. This is recognition of truth. You are not trying to become the Christ. You are remembering that you have always been the Christ, temporarily forgetting itself in human experience. Being born again is this remembering, this awakening to your true identity as the very presence of God made visible. The fourth practice Joel taught is releasing personal sense. Personal sense is the belief that you are a separate individual, managing your own life through personal power and effort. This sense keeps you trapped in limitation because it denies your true source. Being born again means dying to personal sense and living from God's sense. God's sense recognizes that there is only one life, one mind, one presence, expressing as all. Your life is not separate from God's life. Your mind is not separate from divine mind. When you release personal sense, you stop trying to make things happen through effort. You become a channel through which divine action flows naturally and effortlessly. This does not mean you become passive or stop taking action. It means your action flows from a different source. Instead of the anxious striving of the personal self, your action emerges from inner guidance and peace. You know what to do because you are connected to the source of all wisdom. You move with confidence because you trust the presence acting through you. Practice releasing personal sense throughout your day. When you feel burdened by responsibility, pause and recognize, this is not my personal burden. This is divine life, expressing through this situation. The same intelligence that created the universe is managing this circumstance through me. Feel the shift from personal struggle to divine flow. This is the freedom of being born again. Let us be honest about the challenges. The biggest obstacle to being born again is the ego's resistance to dying. Even when you understand these truths intellectually, the false self fights for survival. It creates doubt, confusion, and distraction. It tells you this is too simple, too good to be true, or that you are not worthy of such transformation. Rebecca experienced this intensely. After her initial awakening, she felt weeks of profound peace. Then suddenly, old patterns returned with force. Anxiety, self-doubt, and fear flooded back. She thought she had failed, that her awakening was not real. But this is the normal pattern. The false self does not die quietly. It reasserts itself, testing your commitment to truth. The key is not to fight these returns of old patterns. Fighting them gives them power and reality. Instead, recognize them as the death throes of a false identity. When anxiety returns, do not say, "I am anxious again." Say, "Anxiety is appearing in consciousness, but I am the awareness observing anxiety, not the anxiety itself." This disidentification weakens the pattern. Over time, with consistent practice, the old patterns lose their grip. Not because you defeated them, but because you stopped feeding them with identification. You cannot force being born again to happen quickly. It is a gradual transformation that deepens with daily practice. Be patient with yourself. Every moment of recognition strengthens your new consciousness. Another common challenge is the temptation to use spiritual truth as a way to get things. People hear about consciousness creating experience and immediately think, "Great, now I can manifest wealth, health, and success." But this is still operating from the false self, just with spiritual tools. Being born again is not about getting a better human experience. It is about transcending the human sense entirely. David fell into this trap. He practiced the presence, but only to improve his business. He meditated, but only to reduce his stress. He affirmed his divine identity, but only to attract a relationship. When these things did not manifest quickly, he became frustrated and bitter. He thought spirituality had failed him, but spirituality had not failed. He had not yet understood its true purpose. Joel taught that we do not use God. We surrender to God. We do not manipulate consciousness to serve the ego. We die to the ego so consciousness can express freely through us. When David finally understood this, he released his agenda. He practiced the presence simply to rest in truth, regardless of outcomes. Paradoxically, this is when his life began to transform naturally. The transformation was not magical or instant. It unfolded over months. But it came from a different source, not from his personal striving. His business improved because he made clearer decisions from inner peace. His health improved because stress no longer dominated his system. Relationships improved because he stopped needing them to complete him. He had been born into a consciousness of sufficiency. A third challenge is the intellectual understanding versus lived experience. Many people study Joel's teachings extensively. They can quote passages, explain concepts, and teach others. But they have not been transformed because the knowledge remains in the head, never dropping into the heart where real change happens. Marina was a spiritual teacher who knew Joel's work inside and out. She gave talks, led workshops, and wrote articles. But privately, she struggled with the same fears and insecurities as everyone else. She thought something was wrong with her. How could she teach what she had not fully embodied? Then she realized her mistake. She was trying to understand her way into transformation. Joel taught that transformation does not come through understanding. It comes through revelation. You can study a menu extensively and know every dish, but you will not be nourished until you eat. Marina stopped studying and started practicing. She spent less time reading and more time in silence, less time teaching and more time listening to the inner voice. Within weeks, something shifted. Her teaching became more authentic and powerful because it now flowed from experience rather than knowledge. She could speak about peace because she was living in peace. She could teach about presence because she was being presence. Her students felt the difference immediately. Being born again is not an intellectual achievement. It is a lived reality that others can sense and feel. The final major challenge is staying awake in a sleeping world. When you begin to live from born-again consciousness, you may feel isolated. Others do not understand your new perspective. They may think you have become strange, impractical, or deluded. The collective consciousness constantly pulls you back toward identification with the false self and material sense. Joel himself faced this. Even as he taught profound truths, he lived in a world that valued material success, social status, and personal achievement. He had to consciously choose, moment by moment, to remain anchored in spiritual consciousness while functioning in the human world. This is the challenge every awakened person faces: being in the world, but not of it. The solution is community and consistent practice. Surround yourself, even virtually, with others who understand this path. Read and listen to teachings that reinforce your new consciousness. Most importantly, establish a daily practice that anchors you in truth before the world's demands begin. Start each day remembering who you are before the world tells you who you should be. When you slip back into old consciousness, and you will, do not despair. Simply notice it and return. Being born again is not a one-time event, but a continuous choosing. Every moment offers the choice. Will you identify with the false self or rest in your true nature? With practice, choosing truth becomes natural, and living from presence becomes your new normal. This is the promise and the process. If these challenge-breaking practices resonate with your journey, like this video to support others navigating their own spiritual obstacles, subscribe for advanced teachings on living born-again consciousness daily, and comment, which challenge are you ready to transform through divine awareness right now? Now let us explore advanced integration. When you have been born again in consciousness, everyday situations become opportunities for practice. Consider relationships. Most people relate from need, seeking completion, validation, or security from others. But born-again consciousness relates from fullness. You do not need anyone to complete you because you are already complete in God. James discovered this with his wife. For years, their marriage was a battlefield of unmet needs and constant disappointment. Each expected the other to provide happiness. After his awakening, James approached relationship entirely differently. He stopped asking, "What can I get?" and started living, "What can I give from my fullness?" His wife felt the shift immediately, even before understanding it. As James stopped needing her to be different, she naturally softened. As he stopped demanding she meet his emotional needs, she became more generous. The relationship transformed not because she changed, but because he was relating from a different consciousness. He was no longer a needy ego seeking from another needy ego. He was presence, relating to presence. This does not mean relationships become perfect or conflict-free. It means conflict is handled differently. When disagreements arise, James no longer defends a personal position. He recognizes the divine presence in both himself and his wife, seeking the truth that serves both. From this consciousness, solutions emerge that personal sense could never find. Love flows naturally when need is absent. Consider work and career through born-again consciousness. Most people work from fear and survival. They believe they must labor to earn money to survive. They see work as a burden, a necessary evil. But when you are born again, work becomes something entirely different. It becomes the avenue through which divine purpose expresses through your unique gifts. Sophia was a corporate executive who hated her job. She felt trapped by financial obligations and golden handcuffs. After her awakening, she did not immediately quit. Instead, she brought a different consciousness to the same job. She recognized that her work was not about earning money. It was about serving as a channel for divine intelligence and creativity in the business world. This shift transformed everything. Tasks that once felt burdensome became interesting challenges. Colleagues she once resented became souls she could serve. She stopped working for the company and started working for the presence, letting it express as excellent work through her. Her performance improved dramatically, but more importantly, her inner state became peaceful and purposeful. Eventually, this new consciousness led to new opportunities, and Sophia transitioned to work that aligned more fully with her gifts. But the external change was secondary. The primary transformation was internal. From working for survival to working as service, from laboring under obligation to expressing divine creativity. Your work, whatever it is, becomes sacred when you bring born-again consciousness to it. Health challenges provide another profound opportunity for living from awakened consciousness. When illness appears, the temptation is to identify as a sick person, to feel victimized by the body. But born-again consciousness recognizes that you are not the body. You are the consciousness animating and experiencing the body. This distinction changes everything about healing. Carlos was diagnosed with a serious illness. Initially, he fell into despair and identification with the disease. But then he remembered Joel's teaching. I am not my body. I am the consciousness in which the body appears. He began treating his physical condition while simultaneously resting in his true identity as consciousness itself, untouched by physical conditions. This did not mean denying symptoms or refusing treatment. It meant not identifying his essential self with the temporary condition. He underwent medical treatment while maintaining inner awareness that no physical condition could touch his true nature. He practiced seeing his body as the presence of God made visible, and illness as a false sense temporarily appearing in consciousness. The outcome was remarkable. His healing progressed faster than medical predictions, but even more significant was his peace throughout the process. Whether his body healed or not, Carlos had discovered something that transcended physical healing. The realization that his true self was eternal, whole, and untouched by any physical condition. This is the ultimate healing that being born again provides, regardless of physical outcomes. Financial challenges test born-again consciousness perhaps more than any other area. The material world constantly reinforces the belief that money is survival, security, and power. But when you are born again, you recognize that your supply is consciousness, not currency. Your source is God, not a job, investment, or person. Linda lost everything in a business failure. Her savings vanished, her home was foreclosed, and she faced bankruptcy. For months she struggled in fear and desperation. Then she encountered Joel's teaching on infinite supply. She began to practice recognizing God as her source, not her bank account. This was not easy. Every bill, every rejection, every lack seemed to prove her wrong. But Linda persisted. She did not deny the appearance of lack. She acknowledged it while simultaneously recognizing a deeper truth. The infinite consciousness that created the universe was her true supply, capable of opening channels she could not imagine. She released her grip on how supply must come and simply rested in the awareness that it would come, because divine consciousness was her source. Over 18 months, her situation transformed. Not through lottery or windfall, but through unexpected opportunities, helpful people, and creative solutions that emerged when she stopped trying to force outcomes from limited personal sense. She learned that supply does not come from the world, but through the world, when consciousness is aligned with abundance. Being born again means trusting infinite intelligence over material appearances. You now stand at the threshold of total transformation. Everything you have learned points to one profound truth. Being born again is not a modification of your old life. It is the end of living from the false self and the beginning of living as your true self. This is not a gradual improvement. It is a radical shift in identity, though it may unfold gradually. When you fully embrace this consciousness, you stop asking, "What can I do to make my life better?" and start recognizing, "My life is already the expression of divine perfection, appearing in temporary human form." You stop trying to fix yourself and start resting in the awareness that you have never been broken. The perfection you sought was always your true nature, hidden only by false belief. This does not mean your human experience becomes perfect. You still face challenges, losses, and limitations, but you face them from a different place. You are no longer a vulnerable person trying to survive in a hostile world. You are consciousness itself, exploring and experiencing through human form. Challenges become opportunities for presence to express wisdom, love, and creative solutions. The greatest gift of being born again is freedom. Not freedom from circumstances, but freedom in circumstances. You are no longer enslaved by conditions because you recognize that conditions are temporary appearances in eternal consciousness. Your peace does not depend on things being a certain way. Your joy is not conditional on success or approval. You have found the kingdom within, and nothing external can give it or take it away. As you continue this journey, you will notice something remarkable. Being born again is not a destination you reach. It is a deepening awareness that continues to expand. Each day brings new opportunities to die to the false self and awaken more fully to your true nature. This is what Joel meant by dying daily. You never graduate from this practice. You simply go deeper. Some days the awareness will be strong and clear. You will move through your day in perfect peace, seeing divine presence everywhere, handling challenges with grace. Other days you will forget. Old patterns will reassert themselves. You will find yourself lost in worry, fear, or desire. This is normal. This is the human experience of progressive awakening. The key is not to judge these fluctuations. When you notice you have forgotten, simply remember. When you catch yourself identifying with the false self, gently return to truth. No guilt, no shame, no sense of failure, just a simple return to what is true. This returning is the practice. This remembering is the path. Over time, the returns become more frequent, the remembering more natural. Eventually, living from born-again consciousness becomes your default state. Not through effort or discipline, but through the natural result of continuous practice. You have rewired your consciousness. You have established new patterns of identification. You have become what you always were, but now you know it, live it, and express it consciously. Let me share the ultimate secret Joel revealed about being born again. It is not your achievement. You cannot make yourself be born again through effort or discipline. The one who tries to be born again is the very false self that must die. All you can do is surrender, be still, and let the presence that has always been there reveal itself. This is why striving fails. Most people think being born again means joining a church, getting baptized, or accepting a doctrine. But Joel Goldsmith discovered something far more profound. Being born again is not an event that happens to you. It is a shift in consciousness that changes everything about how you experience life itself. When you are born again in the true mystical sense, you are not becoming religious. You are awakening from the dream of separation. You are recognizing that the life you thought was yours, filled with struggle and limitation, was never your real life at all. It was a hypnotic state, a collective trance. This awakening does not require you to believe anything new. It requires you to see through what you have always believed. The moment you grasp this, your entire relationship with God, with yourself, and with the world transforms. You stop seeking solutions outside yourself because you realize the kingdom is already within. Joel Goldsmith taught that being born again means dying to the false sense of self. Not the self that breathes and walks, but the self that believes it is separate from God. This false self thinks it must earn love, must fight for survival, must protect itself from a hostile universe. That self is an illusion. When you are born again, you do not gain something new. You lose something old. You lose the belief that you are a limited human being trying to reach God. You awaken to the truth that you have always been the expression of God, living and moving as divine consciousness. This is not theology. This is direct experience. The born-again experience is not about becoming holy. It is about recognizing the holiness that has always been present. It is the shift from, I am trying to be spiritual, to, I am spirit itself, expressing in human form. This realization does not come from books or teachers. It comes from inner stillness and revelation. When you truly understand being born again, you stop praying to God and start praying from God. You realize that the voice within you that seeks truth is already the voice of God seeking to express through you. Prayer becomes communion, not petition. You are not asking an external power to fix your life. You are resting in the awareness of divine presence. This shift changes everything. You stop treating symptoms and start addressing the root cause, which is always a mistaken sense of identity. You stop trying to heal the body, get more money, or fix relationships. Instead, you return to the truth of your being, and from that place all things align naturally without force or struggle. Joel Goldsmith called this dying daily. Every day you die to the belief in separation. Every day you are born again into the awareness of oneness. This is not a one-time conversion. This is a continuous awakening, a moment-by-moment choice to live from your true identity as the presence of God made visible. The secret Joel revealed is this: being born again is not about changing your behavior. It is about changing the consciousness from which your behavior flows. When you try to be good, loving, or spiritual through effort, you are still operating